All right, I think we are live. Hello,
And we
everyone.
are live. Are we broadcasting? Are we officially on my channel or your channel?
We're officially on your channel.
Okay, and we are live on my channel. So I am officially in charge of this stream. And what we're doing today is we're called Question the Atheist. Now, ultimately, Pleasure of Doubt and I have been discussing, we have a project that we're going to embark on, and this is the beginning stages of that project. And the questions I'm going to ask him are geared towards kind of getting a sense of how receptive he is as an atheist to any parts of Christianity. If there's anything about Christianity that he likes, appreciates, thinks is cool, thinks is not cool, and possibly might even explore how parts he hates. Like, maybe he hates who knows? We'll find out. We'll ask him questions, and we're going to find is that this is just the preliminary questioning stage. And then we're going to do this again in 3 weeks where the questions are more formalized and he's thought through the questions. And I will have explained to him a little bit more what the intent of the line of questioning is. Does everything make sense so far, Mr. Pleasure of Doubt?
Yes, and the idea is to show, open-mindedness in action. That to be truly open-minded, we have to risk, changing our minds, and we have to put ourselves into a position where we might change our minds, and that we can do it in a civil and non-combative but still constructively critical manner.
Now, do you want to introduce yourself before we start and say anything? I'm pretty sure everybody knows who you are, but you can take some time and
Sure.
Make sure they know how important you are. Make sure they know just exactly what type of a big deal you really are.
That's right. I am the biggest of deals with a tiny channel, but slowly growing. I think I've got about 35 subscribers right now. It's Pleasure of Doubt on YouTube, and so I think I guess I'm a weak atheist or an agnostic, however you want to describe it. I think I'm not convinced that there's sufficient reliable evidence that a God exists, but I'm also not convinced that there's sufficient reliable evidence that no gods exist. So I guess agnostic, weak atheist is how I would describe myself. But a big part of what I try to do is work on bridge building, about trying to combat the us versus them dynamics that sort of pervade all of discussion over the internet, and figuring out ways where people from different points of view can interact with each other, realize the areas they have in common, focus on the areas they don't have in common, and but not hate each other and not be threatened by each other just because they have different beliefs. And so I've been working on sort of methods of productive discussion, which we've talked before, which I'm slowly building on my channel. And I think I have some ideas there that can help after years on the internet, and just trying to spread these ideas slowly but surely and putting them into practice. So this is part of my test of my hypothesis about how different people with different values can interact with one another.
So cool. So should I just start with the questions right away and see
Sure.
where we get to? Okay, so the first question, what would you say is from your opinion, not necessarily, or you could answer the question two ways. What is the biggest bone of contention between you and Christianity? The thing you find most objectionable, and then if you want to also follow up with what you think most atheists or anti-theists find most objectionable, that's fine too. So answer it as fully as you want.
So the things my biggest problem, well, one of my biggest problem with religions in general is the divisions that they cause, that they split up people, that there's my way, our way is the right way, everybody else's way is the wrong way, and more than that, everybody else is evil. They are, we're the chosen people, they are not the chosen people. We're the ones who are going to paradise, they are the ones who are going to hell or not going to paradise. And so, my whole thing is about bringing people together and saying that, you can have different beliefs, but really we probably have more in common than we think. And I think what Christianity, as well as other religions, often do is sort of is the opposite, is in the other direction of that. I mean, there are other other issues that I have with Christianity, I think that if we take at least my understanding of what's in, and I'm not an expert on the Bible or in the Gospels or the Bible. I've read a good
Not
chunk of it.
yet. Not
Yet.
yet.
But my understanding is that there's a concept of hell that is whatever whether it's pitchforks or demons or something else, it's described as eternal suffering.
Or Abba forever.
Yeah. But it's just the message seems to be it's a place of eternal suffering for people who merely do not believe in God or do not believe in Jesus, who do not believe in their hearts that Jesus is Lord or that God raised Jesus from the dead, and that based solely on that, people are sent to suffer for eternity. And I think that is
a negative message.
It's a negative message, and it's not in. I think it's hard to square that with an omnibenevolent deity. I don't think there can be anything worse than eternal suffering. So like that's like the worst thing you can imagine is suffering forever, having no end of suffering. I mean that, and maximal suffering would be the worst of the worst. But so I have so those are a few.
So the two biggest pet peeves, if I heard you correctly, are that you think religion is a force of division often, and you strongly object to the idea of eternal damnation. Both those.
Yeah, off the top of my head, like I could probably think of others, maybe
right. But I'm just worried.
Yeah,
I'm just focusing on the main bones of contention. Now, what would you say? And this you might have to think about. If there's an aspect of Christianity that you find most appealing, something about Christianity, I'll give you an example to maybe get you thinking. For example, Dr. Josh, the agnostic from Digital Hammurabi, went to a funeral of somebody, I don't know who, and he said on Twitter, he's like, this is the thing I miss about Christianity. He's like, I was at this funeral and this is the thing about Christianity that they don't realize that they have. Like he was kind of yearning for something in Christianity, this feeling that your afterlife is secure in heaven. I wish I still had that feeling, or some sort of yearning for that idea. That's just an example. I'm not saying that's your example. Is there anything in Christianity that you go, I get that, I'm attracted to that?
Yeah, like, and remember, now I didn't grow up Christian, so my knowledge of Christianity has come from many conversations, talking with Christians and
right.
reading up on Christianity and so on. But so a few things I would say. I think the message of sacrifice. I think I get that. I get the sort of mythical sort of that the Bible has some positive wisdom in it that can be useful. I think the way they package sacrifice, I think, can be useful to people, where they can say, I can model myself on Jesus, and sort of the hero's journey. I can model myself on this, and I think there's some good aspects to that. I think John Vervaeke, who we've talked about a lot in his Awakening from Meaning Crisis, has sort of awakened me to the sort of value of the rituals in Christian, at least some types of Christianity. I think we could talk a little bit about how you've described, for example, you going into your prayer closet and coming out with serenity, coming out with the feeling of well-being. I think those rituals are probably pretty beneficial, and probably one of the most beneficial aspects to Christianity. From what I can see, like for a lot of people, it does give them a sense of well-being.
Right.
For other people, it does the opposite. But I think that is something that is
okay. This question is not related to the line of questioning. It just came up organically. Do you think that, could you possibly see that it depends on if I have an idea of God as a harsh father who's going to send a lot of people to hell, and if I have a different religious idea of God as a loving, kind, benevolent Jesus Christ, who's only going to send like the truly despicable, worse than John Buck to hell, like worse than John Buck.
How could he be worse than John Buck, really?
You would have to work at it, but you could do it. It's achievable.
We'll see.
Stephanie is Attila the Hun in word form. Stephanie's pure evil.
Socrates looked for one honest man. We will look for one person worse than writer John Buck.
Right. Sorry, John. We had to do it. We had to throw you under the bus just to keep the channel interesting. So you see how do you think that the God concept is built in, or can someone have a God concept that's beneficial and someone have a God concept that's harsh and judging?
I mean, there are all sorts of God concepts that one could have. You know, I mean, the Greeks and Romans had versions of gods that were much more human-like and very far from perfect, and they got angry and they got jealous, and they also did nice things as well. I mean, I happen to my instincts are, if there is a God that exists, it is far more likely that God is not
loving,
is not omni anything, but is a mix. So we probably have loving elements, but also not so loving elements. I haven't been convinced by the arguments that God must be omnibenevolent, omnipowerful, omniscient. That's a possibility, but I can easily think of a deity exists who just has the power to create the universe, but is just very powerful, you know, not all powerful, and knows a lot, but doesn't know everything. You could have a deity, a deistic type deity who just created the world and butts out and doesn't have any other effect in this world. So I think it's open to have concepts of God that are all over the board. Now, whether those would be in line with Christianity, is
right.
Is
okay, but let's try to keep this to Christianity or Christian-like God, because that's kind of what our focus will be. So, have you ever had? Have you heard on my channel where I've described a numinous experience, which is kind of a vaguely spiritual experience? Have you ever had that? And can you think of it and tell us what happened? Renee, for example, German atheist Renee tells about an experience he had in Africa. He's told about it a few times. He's told me specifically once or twice, where he was like 8 or 9 years old, and he felt this overwhelming feeling of like, you know, how profound and awesome life is, and this is so cool that I'm here, and it's deeper than this is just so awesome and mysterious. But most people, and he at the time, would go, I think that was God. But if you're an atheist, you can easily say it's not God, it's just brain chemistry. But have you ever had that type of experience?
Yeah, I don't think I've had anything to that extent. That being said, I have no doubt that those experiences happen, that people have those experiences. And like you said, some conclude it's God, some conclude it's brain chemistry. But I mean, I've had minor variations of it at times, you know, senses.
Okay, let's hear about those.
I mean, like when I've I'm an on and off meditator. I want to be a regular meditator, but I haven't been, so bad me, but I'd like to do daily meditation. But I can recall some experiences in meditation where I felt, you know, very floaty and almost like I didn't quite get an out of body experience, but I felt that sense
of my trippy.
The sense of my quote unquote spirit rising. Like it never got to the point where it actually got out of my body, but I definitely had that feeling of it going. You know, I've had, you know, I mean, just moments of amazement where I just think, I can just think, you know, the fact every once in a while, you know, I think about throwing a baseball and how incredible it is that I could have somebody across a field and throw a baseball directly to that person and just have a sense of amazement at that such a thing is even possible. Like I have no idea how I'm doing those calculations, but there's something in me that's doing the calculations that throws the ball, you know, right across.
Right. So you're saying it's almost like miraculous. What's I get what you mean, but
the sense of amazement. I mean, miraculous might be. I mean, I don't think about it in terms of miraculous, but I think you could. I think someone could have that and say, "Well, it must be God." I think I can see somebody going through that type of feeling, the amazement of life, how everything has come come here.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's drill in on what. So you might describe yourself as spiritual now. Maybe I don't know. Do you?
I mean, I
And how do
I
you define spiritual?
yeah. I mean, I I don't know. I mean, I think I have capacity for emotion and meaning, the capacity for deep feeling of meaning, whether we call that spiritual or not, maybe in the John Vervaeke like sense of,
Right.
you could say like that feeling of amazement at throwing the baseball would be, I think, what Vervaeke talked about in terms of approaching the, I forget how he put it, like the the explosiveness of what's possible, sort of, that the limits of our understanding, and where we're just in sort of a state of awe. So I mean, and I would say I'm probably not super spiritual now, but I see the value in, like, for example, I see the value in pursuing a meditation practice, and focusing on those, what Vervaeke would call. I mention Vervaeke a lot because we've spent the last year
Right.
almost just
Well,
diving right into Vervaeke.
he's been really good for you, and he's heavily influenced you in a lot of ways, which has
Mhm.
made you more open to spiritual ways of perceiving reality. Not necessarily I believe in God, but he can be very spiritual sometimes, and he's really open
Yeah,
to spiritual ideas. And you're open to at least the physiological aspect of I would say, tell me if this is true. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that you are very open to at least the physiological aspects of spiritual experiences, like alterations of brain chemistry and things like that, meditative
yeah.
practices and the benefits thereof.
Yeah, and I'm convinced of the benefits thereof. I'd like to have more of those experiences. It's one reason why I want to start meditating more. To hear Sam Harris, I have his app, and he talks about, and he's talked to in his podcast as well about, he used to do, for example, hallucinogenics, but he can get into those kind of states just with meditation. And
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
I've thought, hey, I'd like to try DMT, but I have no idea how to get it. and I don't have friends who do it, so because you need to do it. Like, I'd like to try something like that at some point, but you need to do it in the
Actually,
right
this was
right
honestly
people.
the question the follow-up question. Have you ever done
Yeah.
psychedelic drugs? Did you smoke weed? How much? And have you
I
ever
did
done
a little bit
mushrooms
of
or LSD?
marijuana back in university. Sorry, I told my kids to watch tonight, but oh well, I guess
Uh-oh.
cats out of the bag there. But I didn't do a lot of it. I was never a smoker, so every time I I took a drag on a joint, I just went into coughing fits. So I never got to the point where I could
Right.
where I could smoke without the coughing fits. But I don't. I think if I knew what I knew now, I would have spent more time trying to cultivate those kind of experiences, and so I
Right.
sort of wish I had.
Because, for example, with me in 10th grade, we smoked weed every single day, every single day, twice a day, everyone I knew. And I did a lot of drugs before I ever got even out of high school, like a lot. Um, there's a mystical strain in pop music. Are you aware of that? There's a whole druggy sort of starting with psychedelic rock and the
Sure.
influence of
Yeah.
like on things like Jim Morrison and the Doors, all the way to Pink
Yeah, I
Floyd.
listened to Pink Floyd. I listened to the Doors way back. Yeah.
So, were
I,
you ever attracted outside of John Vervaeke? Were you ever attracted to mysticism at all? Mystical ideas, any type of mysticism, anything that falls into the category?
I mean, I'm
I'll give you.
attracted
Let
to
me explain it to you so it'll help you. Because, like, for example, when I was in high school, we smoked weed all the time. I was really into the Doors. I was really into early David Bowie. Doesn't really count, but Pink Floyd too. And a lot of things that I was into would led to I would pick up a book by like Aldous Huxley, which would lead to me picking up another book that all was in this mystical strain of thought that was pretty much, even though it was pretty mainstream. A lot of people you could start talking about this stuff with, and any party you'd find like a stoner to start going over this stuff with, that type of things.
I've looked a little bit into people like Huxley and those type of people, but over the years, and I've always readily accepted that there's something there. There's something interesting in terms of those experiences. Whether I've never, I'll admit I'm on sort of the more, I think it's brain chemistry thing. But to me, that I don't know that matters. I think having such a cool experience would be pretty great, whether it's just brain chemistry or
whether you're just tripping out of your brain chemistry or actually contacting another plane, you think you'll try it.
Yeah, like I've heard enough and looked enough into it that I know people do, have changes from these altered states of consciousness, and I sort of wish I was just chicken back when I was younger, and I was never that rebellious. I again, I wish I had, I think I was too. I was too worried that those type of things would destroy my brain, but I don't think these days that's borne out. I think
it definitely is. I was scarily fearless, but I knew a couple people who took that one mushroom too many, and they were gone. A bunch, more than my fair share. One of the girls I lived with in my apartment and my house in college took one mushroom too many, and she went from being like this really chic, cool, hot punk rock girl from like this really cool, like gorgeous sort of chic. Everyone was like, she was the coolest girl in town, to kind of becoming this homeless sort of hippie. She changed dramatically in the course of like a year, and it was scary to see. I knew a lot of people like that. So that,
but then you have people like Steve Jobs who would swear that a lot of what he came up with, he benefited from those kind of trips. So I wish I wasn't so chicken, and now I'm sort of older and with children, and it seems the opportunity may be gone.
Wouldn't be a good look for you. Wouldn't be a good idea at this point. Dad's tripping out. Dad's naked running across the patio. What are you talking about? Take acid. No, please don't.
But Sam Harris, he has said many times that if you practice meditation enough, and I guess in the right way, you can reach those kind of experiences. So I guess that would be a goal I have with meditation.
Right.
If I ever start doing it on a daily basis and getting serious about it, which I'd like to do. And there's also lots of John says, I want to meet the interdimensional elves. I would actually like to meet interdimensional elves. That would be.
So is it fair to say this is what I'm hearing about your general interest in these type of things is almost purely physiological, and almost, which I would expect from an atheist leaning person, almost purely in the rational. I want to experiment with the brain chemistry. You're not necessarily attracted to like, I contacted another. You're not necessarily attracted to the metaphysical side. It's more the physiological side. Is that?
Well, I mean, I think it would be cool. Like for example, I played around with some YouTube self-hypnosis of astral projection, and I was like, hey, if it works, that would be really cool. That never worked for me. I mean, it was nice falling asleep too, but I'm open to putting myself in a situation where I would find out it's real. It's not that I'm not attracted to it. I don't believe currently that you can contact other realms through this. So it's not about attraction or not. It just doesn't seem to be on the menu for me.
Right. Okay.
But that being said, like I said, I tried the astral projection YouTube. They have the binaural beats, and they have a guided meditation, and I went through it, and again, it was pretty cool, but it didn't. And if I had suddenly found myself floating out of my body, I would have maybe tried to test myself. Could have put something outside. Told someone to put something outside. Let me see if I can go see it. I would definitely. I spent a lot of years not studying, but being in the community, a skeptic believer community with parapsychology, where I looked into. So I've always been fascinated with the possibility.
Okay, so you're into this. You're kind of, so you kind of have a streak, a mystical strain in you, or at least an openness.
I was always into, like, when I was younger, I was always into fantasy novels. Like, so I read quite a bit of fantasy. So I've always been.
Which ones? Tolkien.
David Eddings, Piers Anthony, Thomas Covenant.
I say which ones. I have no idea who any of those
Okay,
are.
okay, so
I don't know. There was Elric of Mellenborn. That was the one I read when I was a kid, and I don't even remember who wrote it. It was like some albino who had a sword that stole your soul. Something really weird. I don't remember. Now, okay, so now just in terms.
Sorry, just Mark was saying in chat. Just face it, POD. You don't want to let go of your rational faculties. If you're getting too deep into religion, would require you to let go of your reasonableness. And definitely, I want, if I become convinced of religion or convinced of God, I want it to be in a reasonable way. I want it to be because I've objectively become convinced. Not that I've hypnotized myself or
right. Not that you've adopted for touchy-feely reasons, but because something real. Now let's dig into to God belief, and let's try and figure out where you are on a scale. This might be hard to do because this is a guessing game for me. But have you ever you've never had a period where you were a believer of any sort, right? You never started.
No, I did when I was young. I can recall, and I was never that serious a believer, but I can recall when I was a kid having nightmares, and I remember praying to God that the nightmares would stop, and I think that sometimes worked. So I can definitely remember a time where I did believe, but it was around 11 or 12 where I just gradually lost my belief. So I didn't spend that long as a believer, but I definitely was.
What happened at around 11 and 12? Something specific, or you just kind of like?
Well, my background's Reformed Judaism, and we had to go to Sunday school where we were taught the Old Testament stories, and I remember finding just over time, just believing them less and less. It wasn't no one told me. I never had any influence that I can remember of somebody pressuring me not to believe, but I found myself just hearing these stories and not being convinced by them. Now, I can't say at that age it was well thought out. It wasn't a strong analysis, but I just eventually stopped believing. Now, my parents weren't terribly religious either, and I mean, my parents are probably more agnostic themselves, but they were more cultural Reformed Jews. We went to synagogue on the high holidays, but religion was never we went twice a year, and we did Passover, and we did, Hanukkah, and, the big holidays, but religion never.
So you were cultural Judaism, but not secular Jews. I knew a lot of people like that growing up.
Yeah.
Almost all my friends from high school were secular Jews, or at least half of them.
And not even that big on the cultural Jew, even on the cult. Like, we were not, like, my family, at least my immediate family, is not big in the Jewish community. Like we were never deeply involved. Like, my parents weren't deeply involved in that aspect of the religion. So I didn't have pressure to not become religious, but neither did I have pressure to become religious.
Right.
So I just sort of drifted off and realized
it was the same exact idea with me with Roman Catholicism. We went to church on Christmas and Easter, and nobody ever expected me to go to church past that. And nobody ever expected me to adopt the beliefs, and would have been really surprised if I had. If I started coming out and going like, Jesus, Mom, Jesus said this. She'd be like, what? She wouldn't have never expected me to believe it. And seculars, most of my friends were a huge chunk of my friends. I grew up in New York. Most of my friends were secular Jews, so they went to Hebrew school. That was the sum total of their
Hebrew
Judaism.
school, and then Sunday school, which is we called religious school, where they taught the stories. And so, we were technically Roman Catholic, but we were so not expected to adopt the beliefs that I vividly remember 15, 16 years old at the dinner table having conversations with my family. Do you believe in God? What do you think? These are ostensibly Roman Catholics talking about whether they believe in God or not. So that tells you what, that tells you where we were all at. Now, when you officially, so somewhere along the way, you officially don't believe in God. Did you ever, and try and think if this ever happened, like once or twice, or did you ever catch yourself crying out to God or talking to God
or going like, when you were like 19 or something? You ever catch yourself bargaining with God? Anything like that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess yes and no, and by that I mean, I know I've had moments. I can't remember them in particular, but I just have vague memories of having moments of, oh my God, what if there really is, then what if I'm doing it all wrong? But that hasn't happened that much. But what I have done in more recent years, basically through discussions with Christians who have said, for example, if you want to be open-minded, ask God to reveal himself to you, and he will. So I've done that. I've said,
Oh, you've been doing that?
Usually before I don't do it. I've done it, usually like I would do it before bed. Usually when I'm in bed, I say, God, if you're out there, if you exist, reveal yourself to me. I can't promise how I'll react, but I promise I'll take it seriously and then go from there. And so things like that. So I've done that a number of times. But
I didn't know you did that.
It's active open-mindedness. I mean, I believe in preaching the talk of open-mindedness, and that means again risking changing your mind. And now I can't say that ever. And I've done variations on that where people have said, well, ask for help, say, oh, I need help for a solution. I need you. And I'll say, okay, if you're there, I need some help. I don't remember the exact words, but again, various Christians have said, do this and he'll reveal himself. and so I've done that a number of times, but it hasn't. Nothing that I can identify has come out.
No road to Damascus experiences as far as you know.
Yeah, not yet. Nothing that stood out.
What's interesting about what you just said, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounded to me like sincere. That sounded to me like you meant it. Like somewhere deep in your heart of hearts, you said that for real. You said like, God, if you're really there, I do want to know you and reveal yourself, and meant it. Is that fair to say? It sounded to me sincere.
Yeah, I think I do mean it. Now, I would also say that I would also.
But I don't believe you. Let me follow it up. I want evidence. Go ahead.
No, I'd also say, like, if I became convinced that God existed, I wouldn't necessarily just say, "Oh my God, everything you've done is great." I
explain the Old Testament to me, you monster.
Well, or explain a whole lot of stuff. I mean, explain why you came up with the carnivorous, why you came up with carnivores. Resulting. I mean, I think that's a much stronger. I think coming up, people talk about the problem of evil. They always focus on humans. But I think all you have to do is look at the massive amounts of suffering by creating life that has to eat, kill, hunt other life, tear each other apart through their teeth to survive, and the amount of suffering that has caused from innumerable animals over innumerable years. And that's pretty hard to square with omnibenevolence. So I don't think, at least if I believed in God, that I would say, okay, I have to agree with God, or I wouldn't feel that I shouldn't question God. Like if I died and found myself in heaven talking to God, I've said, where Christians have said, oh, you're a non-believer, you don't want to know God. No, I would want to have a conversation with God. I'd want to say, hey, what's all this about? Right. So I keep an open mind. I'm willing to hear an explanation that I say, yeah, you know what, you're right. That convinced me it is still omnibenevolent. But I might say, hey, maybe consider not doing this going forward. Yeah. But yeah.
Right. So I wish you really hadn't slaughtered the Amalekites' God. All right. So now that kind of surprised me, because that all I say about that is my original comment is that feels sincere to me. That feels like something you meant in the moment. Now, yeah, caveats after the fact, but it sounded to me like a real thing.
Yeah, it is sincere. If God exists, I want to know. I definitely want to know. And if God is having relationships with people, I would want a relationship of some sort, whether it's arguing or otherwise. I would want that if that's out there, if that's something that's available.
Okay, well, you see, these are what the questions. The questions are actually designed for me, and they're trying to tailor to so that I can find out just how resistant you may potentially be and how desirous you may potentially be. And I think these questions are actually giving me a rough idea.
Yeah, and I could tell you, like on omnibenevolence, I think you could call me pretty resistant. Like when I look at the world as it is, and if I have to say, if a God purposely put this in place, I'd have to say it's not evident. It's much more consistent with a morally ambiguous deity that has his good points and his not so great points than one that's just all loving. That one that has some love, but also maybe a bit of a, of a sadistic side as well.
Right. But the difference you're explaining is intellectual resistance versus in the heart, I sense actually not resistance. Like, so just an observation. We don't even have to go into it.
Sure.
Now, so to follow up with Christianity itself, have you ever listened to Christian music at all? Do you know anything about, how much do you know Christian culture?
I mean, only in dealing with various, many Christians over the years, having discussions over the past few decades. Like I've heard Christian music off and on, but I've never, like, I wouldn't say I have a deep knowledge of it, but I've definitely come across it. And you see, I've been to occasional services or weddings, and you see it in media. You see it in media a lot, right? So I have an idea of what gospel singing is about because I've seen it in movies and TV shows all the time, and so on.
The follow-up question is: have you ever been taken to religious type services?
And sorry. In Christianity,
yes,
only a few. Like I went back in university. I went to I forget. It's one of the Protestant ones, but it was a wedding, and every 2 sentences it was Father God, Father God, Father God. I'm not sure. I can't remember the denomination, but I remember that I noticed there was a hypnotic quality to the saying of Father God over and over again. And even in the songs that were there was a hypnotic quality. And so John Vervaeke would call it a psychotechnology. And so I could see what was going on there, that these rituals, these ceremonies were designed to elicit a certain feeling, or I have some understanding of where I've seen, videos of talking in tongues, and I can see how they get the people into that state. That is sort of deliberately putting people into a state by using the psychotechnology, by using the tools, by getting people into a certain altered state of consciousness that I think is repeatable.
Right, but what John Vervaeke has helped you see is that altered state of consciousness, and even consciously putting people into altered state of consciousness, is not necessarily negative. It's you become receptive to it along those lines because you now recognize the objective value to some of these things, right?
So I mean, for example, so I can see there are benefits. For example, I think a lot of these things are similar to meditation. So when I've heard you describe going to your prayer closet, I think it's probably very similar to meditation. And so I'm not surprised when I hear you describe what you come out of it, because that's in line with what my understanding is of meditation. And so I think, I think probably there are a lot of benefits to these type of rituals that Vervaeke talks a lot about, that helps improve insight, helps answer questions. Like I know even when I've meditated, very often when I've meditated, answers to problems I've had pop into my brain, like possible solutions. And Vervaeke talks that it's well studied that meditation brings insight. Now compare that to asking God for help and through prayer. And so I'm not surprised at all in the secular aspect that praying for God to reveal an answer. Yeah, praying works. And I don't know that praying will work to heal somebody from an illness, but I think probably praying will work to help somebody figure out what direction they should go. I just wouldn't necessarily associate that with God. I think it's their own internal working.
But so like in one of my videos where I explain the miracle of the car keys, I don't even have to explain it to you because you get it almost right away. A lot of Christians will report, they pray to God, ask for the car keys, and then hallelujah, the miracle of the car keys, they figure out where the car keys are because Jesus goes, here's your car, here's where you put them. And they're just tapping into their subconscious mind, and their subconscious mind remembered where they last put them, you know, even though the conscious human being, doesn't. So they're just slowing down their thought process, laying hold of a psychotechnology, focusing on their breathing, and in that process, they are tapping into their subconscious mind, and they remember. They lo and behold, their subconscious remembers they left the car keys in the drawer. That's how it works, right?
And I'm not sure how one would. You know, be honest, this is a bias I would have. You know, against like I don't know how one would differentiate between. Is that just my mind doing its thing, or is this a message from God? You know, because
okay, let me give you one.
Let me hear in similar ways.
Okay, let me give you one where it's a lot harder. Where that would be a much tougher question. Now, I read the Bible a lot, right? As a Christian, my subconscious mind probably remembers the Bible a lot better than my conscious mind, right?
Sorry, say that again.
I read the Bible a lot as a Christian. My subconscious mind probably remembers the Bible much better than my conscious mind, like almost photographic memory of the Bible, right?
Right.
Yes? Okay. So now I go into prayer and I'm asking, someone's harassing me at work. You know, his name is John Buck, and I'm working with this guy.
That's John Buck. You know,
yeah, and he's doing
have
evil
a whole
deeds.
stream just complaining about him.
And he's doing these evil deeds. He's torturing small children while I'm trying to work.
Not at all surprised to hear that.
I go home and I'm trying to deal with this difficult person at work. Now the same thing as the miracle of the car keys. I go into prayer to try and figure it out, and I'm led, quote unquote, by the Spirit, quote unquote. I'm using that as a euphemism because I'm talking to you, a secular person. To open the Bible, and lo and behold, my subconscious mind leads me to, you know, turn the other cheek. And I'm like, oh my God, Jesus has told me what to do because it applies to the situation. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you get how that's the same miracle of the car keys? Your subconscious mind, you're accessing it. I'm not saying that's God. I'm saying you get it as a secular person.
Yeah, like I think, for example, a lot of passages in the Bible, from what I could say, can be open to interpretations that could apply to many situations. Like there is wisdom in there. You know, there are useful things. I think there's some non-useful things, but there are the brilliance of the book is that it's subject to so many different interpretations, and especially when you go through when you go from a perspective of assuming it's correct, your brain is going to find something that
makes it apropos to the moment.
Right.
Okay. Yes. But what you just said, is a basic insight of a functioning, intelligent human being. But it is, hallelujah, music to the ears of me, the practicing Christian, because it's something that I would try to argue an anti-theist into, and you just sort of understand it. You know what I mean? You just sort of understand. Obviously, some of these things are wisdom deeper than written down 2,000 years ago, and they can generally apply to what we talk about with metaphorical truths. Maybe it's because you're also a fan of Jordan Peterson that you get that immediately. But you get it immediately, right?
Peterson's Bible series, although ironically, I mean, I think his explanation. I think first of all, I think some of his are good modern day explanations. I'm not sure that's how the original people thought of it, but the fact that even if we accept that these psychological these stories are psychological tales, I think to me actually supports more the man-made, the man-made aspect that they are myths, stories that have been told for years and years and years, and over time, the most insightful of the stories survive, right? So there's a selection process, and with some brilliant people, and again, our people back then, I mean, were more ignorant than we are today, but there are just as many geniuses, I'm sure, back then as there are now, at least proportionately. So there's
so when there's a wisdom truth in a Bible, how do you explain the mechanics of that? How is that occurring in how you view the world now?
That people figure stuff out, that they figure some positive ways to act that help society, and that help people, that help people move in a direction that sort of benefits people as a whole, and maybe not perfectly, but for example, one example is the Abraham story, the Abraham Isaac story, where he's going to sacrifice Isaac, and at the last minute, God took away, said, no, you don't have to sacrifice him, and put a sheep instead. Now that's in some respect, there's a horrifying aspect to that God could ask that in the first place. But from what I understand, another aspect of that story was instrumental in moving society away from child sacrifice. That before that, in the communities around there, people were actually sacrificing children, and this tale was used to get people to stop doing that. So there was a real pragmatic use,
a utilitarian aspect to it that hasn't been fully explored. That's what you're saying?
Well, I don't know if I think scholars have explored it. Like I've been told it, but
hasn't entered into the normal person's interpretation of the Bible.
Right.
Hasn't. Okay.
But so I think, for example, the golden rule. I mean, I have my own version of the golden rule, which I've developed, which I can derive from, I think, objective secular principles. But I think the golden rule is useful because it provides some good results. It's not useful just because it, quote unquote, came from God. We don't like it because it came from God. It's that when people follow it, in general, things go well for society. And if you don't follow it, life, the interactions between people get much worse. So like one belief I have is that all the wisdom, all the good things that are accessible to the Christian in like today's world, at least forget about the afterlife, but is still accessible to the non-believer, right? Or someone from a different religion. That we shouldn't be saying, well, just be like for example, if there is no God, then all that stuff, all that wisdom came from men, came from people. And that doesn't make it, it's not infallible, but a lot of it's still pretty good, at least as rules of thumb. And the fact that, it makes you think, the fact that the Bible can be read in a way that lets you interpret in different ways, lets you figure stuff out, work stuff out, I think is positive. Now we could do that through secular ways as well.
Now, so when you see that there's a golden rule in other faith traditions, what does that say to you? How do you interpret that?
That
just as you said,
that it's a good rule. It's a good general rule that if I go through life on the assumption that I want to treat people the way I want to be treated, that I will help them, they will help me. In order for me to achieve my goals, right, I need them to help me. If we don't follow the golden rule, for example, we say steal from everybody. Well, that's a pretty terrible lifestyle to have, where everybody just goes and steals each other's stuff. Or, if we say thou shalt not kill, well, any society that just allows murder is a pretty terrifying, horrific place to live. And there are places in the world today, where there's genocide going on right now, where they don't really value thou shalt not kill. It's a good moral principle, regardless of whether it comes from God or just comes from people figuring it out, that, hey, we shouldn't go around killing each other for no good reason. And so I mean, the golden rule in particular, people figured out that things go well, things go better. If there was no positive effect from the golden rule, we wouldn't venerate it today. There are certain aspects of the Bible that people conveniently just quietly let drop because we've concluded they're not great today. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live.
Right. That's the one that I always point to. Yeah. That there are certain scriptures that nobody takes literally, even the most literal literalists. You don't see them arguing like, if somebody picks up sticks on Sunday, kill them. Nobody's going, that's from God, we should follow that out. So there's some that have just stood the test there. So this is how I would say that, and I'm pretty sure we both agree. There are some scriptures that have stood the test of time because they are, what would you say, more eminently reasonable, life-affirming, and objectively true. I used to call these the truth claims of the Bible versus the faith claims. So for like example, a truth claim of the Bible would be Jesus goes before and teaches everybody to humble themselves by washing the servants' feet. Did that literally happen? Who knows? But what's the truth claim? Humble yourself. The greatest amongst you shall be the servant of all. Your job, if you want to excel, is to go get even more humble. This is the value of humility. So would you say, do you understand what I mean by truth claims versus faith claims?
John Buck and I, that bastard.
Yes,
we've had a lot of discussions about I'm uncomfortable calling it a truth claim, but I would say a moral good. Say that it's good rather than true. That it's good and that it helps us. It's sort of some of it. A lot of the things in the Bible I would say is in line with objective morality, and other things I would say are not in line with objective morality.
But you are kind of a moral realist, or you are a moral realist?
I am, in the sense that I think any moral system has to start from at least something semi-subjective. In that, I don't want to get into the whole thing, but mine very briefly is humans, at least for human morality, we all have the goal to survive, thrive, and be happy / have well-being / eudaimonia. It's true that's subjective, but I think it's as close to universal as we get. We're not self-sufficient. We require other people to live and work together to achieve our goals. And I think starting from those principles, you can build up, even the golden rule. And plus, there's some things about suffering. The maximal suffering, the worst scenario you can imagine is every conscious being that exists suffers maximally for its entire existence. And that's the worst you can get. And then you can work backwards to the principle of you should not cause unnecessary harm or unwarranted harm, unwarranted suffering. If we're going to, sometimes you got to chop off the leg to save the body. So sometimes we have to cause suffering to achieve a greater good. But objective more, we can say the worst possible thing would be everybody suffering for eternity. So somebody consciously, deliberately making everybody suffer for eternity would be the most evil thing you could do. So putting all of that together, some of it's a bit subjective, but I don't think much. So I think it's as close to objective morality as we get. And again, from that you derive the golden rule: thou shalt not kill. You derive a lot of the same moral claims that you would have in the Bible, although you don't have the things against homosexuality. So, it's hard to get, I think, prohibitions against homosexuality on what I've set out. So it's not exactly the same. But I still think, with some exceptions like homosexuality and abortion, that type of thing, people are much closer to each other in morality than they are different, for the most part, with some exceptions.
Now, shifting gears a little, because we don't have all that much more time. And again, we're going to formalize. I think you kind of understand what the line of questioning is getting at, right? You kind of get what we're doing, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to have formal versions of these, and we'll meet again in 3 weeks, and we'll go over a lot of it, but with more thorough answers and more thorough of some of the same territory. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. Jesus Christ, the person of Jesus Christ. Have you read the Gospels?
I've read the Gospels. I've read the 4 Gospels, although I started rereading them late last year, but I didn't get too far. So they're not totally fresh in my memory, but I have gone through the 4 Gospels.
Have you seen like an Easter show at Christmas or something of the basic storyline? Ever seen anything on TV like the greatest story ever told? Any of that stuff?
Yeah, the 3 wise men and
anything about the character of Jesus that you like? Any things he said that you're like, yes, I'm down with that?
I mean,
or attracted to?
I think the sacrificial metaphor is really useful. I think sacrifice, I mean, it can't be taken too far. We can't all sacrifice all the time. That would not be a good society. But I think there are times where sacrifice is positive. So, I'm not an objectivist like an Ayn Randian where you should never sacrifice for anyone. I think sacrifice is often very positive, and there are times where we, especially as a parent, sacrifice for your children, and even sacrifice for society. I think that there's a role for that. I think the things I'm less crazy about with Jesus are, again, really focus on I'm the only way. Everybody else is.
I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He who comes
and if you're not through me, you better tear your eyes out, than not follow me. I mean, that I'm less crazy about. I mean, so some of the parables, I think, like again, the rich man and Lazarus is to me a pretty horrific story of this man who may have been a little bit selfish during his life. Maybe he wasn't a great man in life, but now he's stuck forever suffering. He's desperate to not be there, desperate for his family to not come there. And he's basically told, well, too bad, you're stuck and no one crosses from one side to the other. And this is your lot. Like that's horrific. Like that's a horrific story to me. And it doesn't make me say, oh yeah, that's the all loving God. So there's pros and cons, I would say, too. But I'd have to go through before we talk again. I'll try to reread the Gospels and get. I meant to do it even before today, but to get it back in my head, just the specifics.
Well, the one main thing is find the 50 scriptures that you like, that you can go. This is good. This I approve of. This. If this were the only thing the Bible said, I'd be 100% behind it. If you can find 50. If this were the only thing the Bible said, I'd be totally cool with it.
Yeah, I can go through it on that. I mean, I know I definitely remember when I was going through it like last year, annotating it a bit, saying I remember seeing a lot of things I wasn't quite on board with, where I thought, what, this isn't great, but but I can't remember the examples right. John, the book of John is really well told. That John.
That's what John said. That's funny. All right. So the other question is, how much of a Jungian are you? When we were talking about Jung, I don't remember. Did you tap out then? There was a time when we were having conversations.
I don't know. I don't know a lot about.
Where you exited the building?
I've heard people talk about Jung, but yeah, I haven't read Jung myself. I've heard lectures of people like Peterson who loved Jung. I've heard lectures from people who say Jung was basically pseudoscience. He never did any experiments, and a lot of it's bunk. So I'm pretty agnostic on Jung. I'm not pro or against him. I don't know enough to have a.
Now, this is a weird question. Let me see if I asked it correctly. But when we were talking about ground of being, do you have a basic understanding of what a ground of being is? What that means, sort of?
I think so. What is required to keep being going, I guess.
Now, let's say there was a ground of being, okay, and this is kind of a question from the Jungian point of view. Do you think it may be necessary for human beings to anthropomorphize a figure to worship, they can relate to, as a figure of the Godhead, like a Jesus Christ? Even if Jesus Christ is not the one and only Son of God, do you think it might be necessary for people to experience the sacred personally, to anthropomorphize their God figure, so they can personalize it, and now they have a friend, Jesus, who sticks closer than a brother? Do you understand the question? Did I ask it correctly?
I think I understand the question. Like, I'll be honest, I have a bit of a problem with the concept of worship. Like, I can understand, loving. I can understand respecting. I can understand, learning from. I don't really get worship in the sense of,
well, then just
we're not worthy. We're not like I don't. My gut tells me that's going too far. That's not positive. But I do. but I think there's something useful, I would say. I mean, I can see there being a use in anthropomorphizing, like God as the metaphorical seeking of the utmost good, and just conceptualizing it in God. Like I would probably do it. I would probably just do it, leave it at utmost good. But I can see a value to that.
Okay, so let's say
the only way. I'm not sure that it's necessary, and that I can think of other ways that might achieve the same goal.
Okay, so let's say, and this is these two questions blend together. So do you have a kind of a reverence for life itself? Would you say that you really deeply love life? Let's say.
I mean, having suffered from depression, probably not, but I have those moments, like I value life, but and I think that the seeking of good experiences and joy and love and all that probably make up for a lot of the suffering. Although where we would value, like where you would value the good things you get, the good experience you have, higher than the bad experiences that you get. So it's not just a one-to-one where you want to have more good than bad. But I mean, no, I mean, I wouldn't describe myself in probably in the terms that you just
Okay,
said.
so when John Vervaeke talks about sacredness, do you think that there's aspects of life itself that you would describe as sacred from a purely secular point of view?
I mean, I guess in terms
Anything, like
I
your
didn't
child,
really like, that was one thing I wasn't as crazy about using the word sacred, but yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly my children, I would say, are sacred to me. Probably certain ideas, probably my my drive to bring parties together, I probably would be sacred to me. My drive to want to explore, to test my ideas, would probably be sacred to me.
sacred to you. Okay, that's cool. That's actually cool. So if a ground of being would be like the sum total of all life itself, the anthropomorphization comes where I, an individual human being, can't relate to that. But I can easily relate to Jesus is the friend who sticks closer than a brother, and personify all of these weird, chaotic, complex feelings about life itself into anthropomorphize and then personify it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, that does make sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me, though, and this is sort of the Vervaekean take as well, is taking a dogmatic approach to it. That, like, to me, seeing God in that way, or Jesus in that way, can be useful. But then I would say, well, then we should just want to drop the parts that we've outgrown and be willing to bring in new aspects to these stories as well, to these modern day, to have sort of modern day morality tales that we also use. Like, I agree that narrative is often very important in spreading these messages, that it is much easier to sometimes come up with these messages and spread these messages through a narrative than just saying, hey, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and it's good. That telling it in a story is a great way of communicating. But I would want it to be open and dynamic, rather than closed and this is the only way and everybody else is wrong.
Right, but I wasn't actually putting the dogma in. You did. I was just saying, like, you relate to this being that you have said is the Godhead, and you've put him as, you've only attached a couple of key phrases to him: friend who will stick closer than a brother, someone I turn to in times of need. You know, the dogma part is a plug-in from, granted, from Christianity. I'll give you that, but doesn't need to enter into the conversation right now. What I'm asking you is, do you think? I'm kind of asking you. It's a weird question. I give you this. Do you think that might be a necessary thing for people? Like, you understand how narrative works that way. Do you think it might be necessary for people to do that?
I'm not Yeah, I have no reason to believe it's necessary, though I think it could be useful for some people. So I don't think everybody needs to do it that way, but I can see how some people doing it that way, it would be useful for them and they could have positive benefits through that.
Okay. So when somebody goes to a church, do you know any Christian people outside of myself that you're like, that person seems to be getting the right thing from their religion? That person's doing it right. They seem to be a compassionate human being. They're deriving the right messages from Jesus' example. They're trying to be Christ-like in a way that I think is good and beneficial to other people. And they're not too dogmatic. They haven't tried to sentence me to hell just yet. They're not,
Yeah. No, I mean, for sure. I think the less, dogmatic, and I think there are people who I've seen, what, like, I wouldn't be interested in trying to challenge that person out of their beliefs. They seem fine. They're not.
Right. That's exactly what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I like what religion is doing to that particular person. I wish every Christian were like him, and then I'd have no problem with Christianity.
For example, also like somebody who's an alcoholic who believes that they're going through the 12 steps and they believe that God.
That's a great example.
Like, I would never want to. I would say it's wrong for me to try to have a discussion with them to try to change their mind. But I mean, my approach to any of these discussions, I only want to have discussions with people who are looking to have these discussions. So I'm not an evangelist in terms of
right. Yes. Not at all.
I want to have discussions with people who are also looking to challenge their own beliefs. So I want to challenge my beliefs. I want you to challenge your beliefs, and we sort of do it together. And I'm not really interested in forcing somebody to do it. Now, that being said, I mean, the people who are trying to impose it on other people, I mean, I might be more trying to do it.
Those people you want to evangelize a little bit
more. Yeah.
Okay. Now, AA is a good place to go. That's actually kind of fertile territory, because AA. Do you know anything about AA? That it's a spiritual based program?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been to it, but I know of it, and I've seen descriptions of it, and so yeah, that may God grant me
the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference.
Right. And that AA is about, I'm not capable of doing it on my own. I need God to help me do it, which I'm not crazy about that aspect of it. But
well, it's interesting when I because once upon a time I was in the room.
Wait a minute, and John just damned me to hell. Like, this guy.
What did he say?
He said,
what did he do?
I damn Brett to hell every week before we go live. So this guy, he's just the worst. He's just the worst.
I tried to tell you, but you're always defending him. You're always defending him in DMs.
Yeah, man, my eyes have been opened.
Now do you see how the spiritual aspect of the program can be really helpful? Yeah, there's the part you object to, because I objected to when I was in it. Because the first step, number one, is we admit that our lives have become unmanageable. We admit that we are powerless. They mean powerless over alcohol, not powerless in general. Just powerless over alcohol. And
by the way, just to interrupt, you had said one other aspect that I'm not as crazy about with Christianity is the whole original sin, and we deserve to go to hell, and we're wretches who deserve hell, who need to be saved. But anyway, sorry, that just popped in my head. But that's another one of my pet peeves. But anyway, go on.
So do you see how useful the spiritual aspect of that program was towards helping people stop drinking? And can you explain it in secular terms?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how for some people that can be very effective. I can see from what I understand, I haven't looked into this in detail, but from what I understand, AA has, a spotty record of success. But I think there could be secular versions of AA that are just, if not more effective. But I can see how for some people using that metaphor, or using that ground, if you want, or that anchor could be helpful. Like, for example, is it David Wood, the
Yes,
psychotic
David Wood.
person who, bashes father in with a hammer and
Right.
has found Christianity as a way of giving morality. For him, I would say, I would never
stay a Christian. Stay a Christian, please.
Want to try
talking him out of his faith.
Out of it, like, he's somebody who's an actual psychopath. Just whatever works. You just leave them to their belief, affirm it. Like, this is a guy who has actually been violent, and it's also like a lot of Christians who say, if I wasn't Christian, if there's no God, anything goes. I don't think most people actually believe that, but a psychopath does. So they're one of the few people who whatever works to get them to not be a psychopath. I'm happy to go with.
Right. Now, so there's aspects of his testimony that you didn't find compelling. At least you didn't find it was the supernatural sovereign power of God that made him not be a psychopath. But you do recognize clearly that there's at least theoretically a transformational power available to Christianity, whether it's through some of the things we're talking about, where you're meditating, how can you explain it in secular terms? Because you can probably get a really good grasp on that in secular terms, particularly by way of John Vervaeke.
Right, and that's what I would say. I think transformative experiences happen not all every day, but they happen all the time, and you don't necessarily know when they're going to happen. But from what Vervaeke is talking about, you can increase your chances of having them by performing certain rituals, by performing certain psychotechnologies, by engaging in certain practices like meditation. So I think I definitely think there are transformative experiences that can happen through religion. There's no question. I think sometimes they can go the other way too. They can be positive, but I think they can also lead people negatively as well. So I mean, there's pros and there's cons. But see, I'm not an anti-theist. I think for many people, religion really does give them a sense of, like we talk about, the sense of meaning, the sense of my place, a person's place in the world. How they view themselves in the world, how they view the world versus them. And so I think religion does often provide an answer for somebody to help situate themselves in the world. I think for me, I'm not sure that would quite work, because I'm just skeptical of it being true. But I can put myself in the shoes of somebody who really does feel a deep sense of belonging from being quote unquote loved by God, so to speak. And God loves, but that could be valuable to some people.
Part of what you almost completely get, and we're not quite there. There's still some discords and disconnects between you and I, but where we are almost at is there are knowable facts about religious experiences, and you and I are almost at the page where we can agree almost 100% on what those knowable facts are, outside of whether God exists or does not exist.
On the phenomenological aspect, we probably have a lot of agreement of what can come out of religion.
I want to try to get that agreement almost note perfect, so that we agree almost around the boards and get it right up to the part where the dispute, the disputed territory comes into play. We recognize what the disputed territory is, and what I want us to get to is an almost total agreement, and this has got to come from you, on the knowable facts, what the knowable facts are, and I'm perfectly willing to secularize it to the best of my ability, and that's part of what I'm doing. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I think that's valuable. That's a valuable exercise for us to do. And like, I don't have a lot of pushback when people describe their personal experience. Like, I'm sure there's always some loss of truth in recounting because our memories are not perfect, but I usually give people the benefit of the doubt that they have generally experienced what they say they've experienced. Where we probably differ is what causes the experience. And sorry, there's somebody in chat, Absolute Truth, who said God is not a religion. Yeah, no, I don't think God is a religion. I don't know how I framed it, but there are religions that worship God, and I don't think you have to have a religion to worship God or believe in God. So yeah, I don't think God itself is a religion. However, I don't know how I phrased it earlier.
Now, the other thing is that I've explained this to you once, and I'm pretty sure you almost perfectly understand it and agree with it. But let's go over it one more time. You understand the concept of turning up the heat on a subjective experience to powerfully amplify your subjective experience of it. And I use the example in my videos, and I've told you the example once. It's a very Vervaekian idea. I borrowed it directly from him, of the person becoming ever more patriotic on the 4th of July by participating in a ritual.
Sure.
Pretty sure you understand this completely, but I'm going over it also for the audience. By participating in a ritual on the 4th of July, and then help me fill it out so the audience sees that we're on the same page. By participating on a ritual on the 4th of July that is patriotic, I am further experiencing my subjective experience of feeling of patriotism, and I'm amplifying it. And the reason why a lot of military people are so hyper patriotic is they do stuff like that all the time. They put on patriotic music. They have flags flying around their house. They put on,
they're cultivating the experience and the feeling, and these are all psychotechnologies that they're using to cultivate this.
And they're deliberately cultivating it on purpose to amplify their subjective experience. Right. You understand that completely, right?
Yes.
Okay, so explain it in your words.
Well, that through the use of psychotechnologies, which are sort of just mental tools. So reading is a psychotechnology, meditation is a psychotechnology, just sort of they're tools that you use for your mind, but that you do over and over again. So rituals would be a psychotechnology. So by engaging in these practices over and over and over again, you can sort of reinforce, I would say secular, you can reinforce certain brain pathways that produce certain experiences. And that the more you do it, the better you reinforce those pathways. So the more you put yourself into a chance of having those experiences.
Right. So you're deliberately cultivating and amplifying the subjective experience, taking it from 3 to 15 to 25. So you're making it more vivid and real to you by participating in the ritual.
My only way I would say it, though, is a little bit, I say it's, but it's not quite as direct as that. Is that you can't just choose to amp it up, but you can choose to engage in psychotechnologies, in practices that we know from experience results in amping it up.
Okay. So you participate in the 4th of July ritual. You have you put on soldiers marching in the morning. So you start thinking, rah, rah, America. You put on, so you're deliberately amplifying and cultivating it so that this is basically, you could do this in the evil too. This is what the Nazis did.
Yeah. Yeah.
They deliberately amplified the subjective, falling in love with Nazism in the state, and they had rituals round the clock that got people more and more hyped up on Nazism. So it functions in the atheists and the anti-theists are right in the fact that there is, at a certain level, it functions like a drug. Just like a drug, you are going to channels in your brain and changing your brain chemistry. But you are taking it. You're not putting a chemical there, but you are altering your brain chemistry through ritual.
Yeah, it's a different pathway, right?
Okay, and you're learning how to practice and cultivate those specific rituals to amplify the experience. So we're totally on the same page, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, I think that's all for now.
John Buck actually just had a comment. He said, what do you say? One area where we may have disagreement is on the overall utility of religion. I mean, I would say, yeah, probably what the last bit of disagreement will be on the large scale social utility of religion. I mean, I definitely see the social utility of religion, but I think there are downsides as well. Like I've talked about earlier, I think it can divide people, but within the community, it can definitely have social benefits. It just, I think, causes strife from without, which I'm not a fan of. And if it wasn't, and well, look, we're not really in the radical right seems to have a bit less power these days. But there was some time, I think, in the relatively recent past where the radical Christian right was really working to impose a lot of Christianity on others, in terms of politics, which I'm a big fan of separation of church and state. So I think but I'm not an anti-theist in the sense that I think there are definite negatives to a lot of religions over the years, but I also think there's positives, and so it's I'm not an anti-theist. That being said, I'm not critical of Christianity or religions, how historically they've been at times, but I also see that there's been a lot of positive stuff as well, and it's played a crucial role in the development of Western civilization.
Cool. So that's we did our piece for now. Going forward 3 weeks, we're gonna I'll formalize some of these questions, and maybe should I send them to you on a recording device, and then you write them down so you have them ahead
whatever
of time?
It's easier for you, or if you have them written down, I mean, that would be easier for me, but however works. You can, if it's easier for you to record them, then I can. Well,
it's the only reason why it's easier for me to record them is because I'm going to. I write and talk at the same time. I never write anything down. I just yap. That's what I do. I yap.
Sure. Yeah, however you do it, I can take it down. That's not a problem.
And then, did I give you the homework assignments are going to be Finding God in the Waves, and giving either a book report on air here or on your channel, or however you want to do that, and 50 scriptures that you like.
Yeah, I'll probably do something on my channel, or a couple of videos. Maybe I'll read a chapter. I don't know how many chapters there are in this book. Maybe do a chapter and give some thoughts instead of doing.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Vlog approach to it. But and just for the people who are listening who may not have been at the beginning, we're at the beginning stages of possibly doing sort of a project, which we'll talk more about later. But this stream has been a sort of prelude to that, to see if there's something we can work with here, and we'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks. But I think there's potentially exciting and interesting project that we have here in terms of putting open-mindedness to the test.
Yes, exactly. And does anybody have questions? Do you see any questions in the live stream?
I've been looking here and there. I don't know if someone has a question, maybe they could just type it now quickly.
Are there any stupid questions? Are there any stupid questions?
Well, I mean, John Buck has just been, but I don't know. I didn't even want to talk about it. But
why would you do it now?
No. I'm just joking. I'm just kidding. We love John Buck. Yeah.
Yes.
Just to be clear for anybody who's listening, we're joking.
Yeah, I got into so much trouble with my title last time.
I know.
Craig destroys Pleasure of Doubt. I can't believe you said you destroyed it. 4 or 5 people at least.
Well, because people are not used to that being tongue in cheek, and if you don't know our history, then people most of the time when people are doing that, it's the clickbait. Hey, but they are thinking the person to destroy them. Sorry, writer John Buck. Is this sentence is false? Yeah. Just a troll, just a nasty troll.
Yeah, are you going to analyze the Schuyler fiction debate on your channel?
I don't know. I maybe I could. Well, now that I've got all this homework, and I've got some other homework for other stuff. Maybe not. I mean, did you want to talk about it for a few minutes, or
we can talk about it for 5 minutes if you want to just give your post game analysis.
Yeah, now I was half asleep for part of it, and then I listened to the rest of it in the morning, so it didn't have my full attention. But I mean, it was quite frustrating for me to listen to, and Dry Apologist is going to be talking about it in about half an hour. I'll probably stop by for that stream. I don't know a lot about Schuyler, but the last 2 debates with him I watched, he's pretty aggressive, which I'm not a big fan of. But if I can give some constructive criticism to you, I think you really you really bought it into a hook, line, and sinker. So you sort of gave him back and sort of gave into almost what he wanted. But so I think maybe going forward, maybe try not to let yourself get so. I mean, you were clearly irritated, and you let it show. I mean, I think you were a little more suspicious of him. And I listened to your video where you basically concluded, I think, that he knew his argument was weak, so he was just trying to rile you up. That I don't believe. I think he believes his argument is strong, and I think he just has a very aggressive attitude and likes playing sort of the aggressive debate, hardcore debate role. I didn't see any evidence that he believed his argument was weak, so he was trying to draw attention away from that. So I would be very careful of assuming you know the motives and then responding on that assumption, because if it's not right, then it's non-productive, and the other person is just going to push back on it because they don't believe they're playing games. Most people don't think they're playing games, right? They think the other person's playing games. And I think it's almost better to just, even if you think somebody's playing games, to just play it straight. To just, say, I think you were right to say, hey, let's calm down. Although no one who's told to calm down ever calms down.
Well, he eventually did, though. He eventually did calm down, and it had to be said because even in his comments to me, he framed it like we were talking over him, and he didn't see him. He doesn't necessarily see that he was being the aggressor. Now, I could have second guessed the motives. I do that a lot. You'll find that's one thing there. The one thing that you and I disagree on is that I'm always analyzing motivations, and you seem to always object to it. I'm going to do a stream just on operating in bad faith, and I'll try to clarify some of that just for your edification. It'll be almost strictly for you. But I do that a lot. I second guess motivations because that's what I'm experiencing in the moment. I knew his syllogism was really weak, just based on the premises, and I think he didn't necessarily know that we could have easily just demolished it, but he kind of sensed it. So he started getting, because it wasn't organic. The only reason, my only evidence for this, and take it or leave it, but this is the evidence for that, okay, is that it totally wasn't organic to the moment at all. He was acting 100 times more exasperated with us than the situation could have possibly organically warranted. We weren't being that dumb. He kept going, oh God, hurry up. See that he said to drive, hurry up, man, get it out. It was a game. It wasn't.
I don't know
real.
if you like. I've got a bit of ADHD. I have a lot of ADHD. So he may have some of that where sometimes you can get frustrated when things are going too slow. I sort of got that. I don't think his reaction was appropriate, but I could get into his head a bit about the frustration. But let me just say this. Okay, let's say you were 100% right in your analysis of his motives. Wouldn't it still have been better to spend the time, rather than complaining about his motives, just going straight to taking apart the argument? Wouldn't that have been a more productive?
I kind of did take apart the argument. The thing that I argued in, I also have another video coming out with the same thing. The problem with his syllogism is that a premise has to be an established fact. A premise can never be stronger than the weakest. A syllogism can never be stronger than the weakest premise in the syllogism. So if you can reasonably object to one of his premises, syllogism fails. Now, he was offering that as a logical proof, which means it's got to be established fact. Socrates is a man. No such thing as a reasonable objection to the premise, Socrates is a man. All of his premises you could reasonably object to, and Dry Apologist was reasonably objecting to it when he started going, hurry up, man, I can't believe I have to deal with this garbage. So I just think he was trying to huff and puff to stop us from dismantling the argument. That's really what I think was going on.
My guess is, though, I mean, we could do a stream where we go through it and we stop and pause. But my guess is he was actually frustrated and that he probably likes a bit of putting on a bit of a show as well. But I don't think it's for manipulative I don't think he's just because he knows his argument is weak. From the little I know, or from what that wasn't the sense I got, but it's that he does probably amp it up a bit for the sake of modern day debate, for audience. Parts of the,
I mean, what does people in the chat think? Do they agree with you? I hear you, and I'm listening, and maybe you're right. I've never thought about it that way, but it's hard.
So hold on. We have a
way.
question. We have a question from Gavin Herleman. Craig, how do you feel about the phone booth war?
So fun. Gavin's fun.
Craig, how do you feel about the phone booth war with fiction? I don't know what that's related to. Do you?
No. What's the phone booth war?
I don't know.
We're talking about the debate right now, but I don't know what the phone booth war is. I didn't watch it. He put out some stream where he said Craig is a crybaby or something like that. I didn't watch. I didn't have time to watch it because I was doing this, and I probably won't watch it tonight because I don't really want to get.
Oh, with Skylar, the phone booth war with Skylar Fiction. What's the phone?
No idea. He might have said it in the stream. He put out some stream this afternoon called Craig is a Crybaby. I didn't bother to watch it because it would have taken too long, and I doubt I'll watch it tonight because I really don't want to get even sucked into it. Maybe I'll get to it tomorrow. Maybe I won't. I don't know. We'll see.
John Bucks wants to know if you've stopped beating your wife. Just a question that guy would ask.
Dude, honestly, you never stop beating your wife. Never. I wouldn't even joke about that nowadays because people come arrest you.
Yeah.
I swear to God, you'll get arrested just for joking about that. But
Spartan Theology saying that's a bit much, saying all his, I think Skylar's premises were wrong.
Well, they're not all wrong. The syllogism is only as strong as its weakest premise. So all I have to do is find one premise that I can reasonably object to, and the syllogism fails as a logical proof. The syllogism has an extraordinarily high burden of proof. He was basically saying this proves that God doesn't exist. That's an absurdly high claim, a high bar. So if I can find a reasonable objection to any single premise, the syllogism fails.
Yeah, and the worst it does is the worst his syllogism does is demonstrate a certain narrow conception of God.
That's what he always conflates, and he never listens to me when I try to explain that to him.
I wouldn't have taken that approach. I wouldn't have taken that approach. I would have gone more on that rationality. I mean, I like the Vervecki approach to rationality. That rationality has to include a systematic method of reliably resolving or overcoming self-deception and how does he frame it? Self-illusion. And I think the way you are defining rationality is part of it. That if this is good for me, it's probably rational. But I think but I don't think you included in your definition the part about double checking for self-deception and
right, of course. But I honestly thought we were gonna have a conversation, and then the whole thing was about the first half hour was his syllogism. And then the problem with this syllogism is exactly what you said. And he doesn't listen to it, so he never recognizes it. You could use that syllogism to prove that this particular theological idea is false. Okay, that's an achievable goal by syllogism. But he was saying that the syllogism proved God doesn't exist. So, it's just not achievable.
I'm one who would say that even if there are problems with the Bible, you could say, okay, that particular version of God doesn't exist, but it doesn't disprove that any God doesn't exist.
Well, that's exactly the point. And
that's why I'm agnostic. I don't think you can prove that no gods exist. I think that's exceptionally difficult. I've never been able to do it, and I can't think of how you could do it.
But he wasn't letting me just object reasonably along those grounds because he just wanted to win. If he had a softer syllogism with instead of the premise was Satan is a real being, Christians think Satan is a real being, or some Christians think Satan is a real being. Now you have a premise. Can't be reasonably objected to. But there's only so much you're going to be able to prove. Satan, as according to this theological understanding, probably isn't correct. And I might not even argue with them because, I probably agree with that. You know what I'm saying? He could have chiseled it down to something true and workable and provable, but it would have been far less ambitious in scope. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah, and I mean, I would have attacked it more on if I would have gone more on the, you know, to call it, to call it rational. You know, there has to be much more effort into trying to prove it wrong as well as proving it right. That we need to have both in term to be rational. We need to do both. We need to be trying to demonstrate it's true, but also trying to strike it down and see if it survives the onslaught. And Gavin just clarified that the phone booth war with fiction means the strife with Schuyler in that debate. So he's just saying, how do you feel about that strife with Schuyler in that debate?
I mean, he wants to keep going. I don't really care about it at all. I have one other video to post, and then maybe I'll post another video.
But it'll be interesting. I mean, I wouldn't mind moderating. See, if I was a moderator, I would have been much more active as a moderator. I think I like James. I don't know him personally. Interact with him a few times on Twitter, just very briefly. He's a very nice guy. I like his show, but he's not a active moderator. He's very hands off, and I think a little bit more hands on moderating and bringing people back would have benefited productive discussion. But I'm not looking for debate. I'm looking for discussion. So I definitely moderate a debate between a discussion between you and Schuyler, where the goal is to slow things down and work through these issues, not just to win, but to really try to get somewhere.
Right. Well, I mean, I thought because Dr. Josh was coming, I honestly thought that it was going to be more of a conversation. I was really surprised that he started out aggressive. I was like,
I think you have to like my approach to that is making that clear in advance. Like when I try to set up a discussion with someone, I'll say, I don't want to debate. I want it to be a discussion. So I think you have to be explicit with that, not just hoping that it will.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't care that much. So, you know, yes, that's probably a good point. I just thought it was going to be more and so did Dr. Josh. Apparently thought it was going to be more of a just kind of, we were hanging out talking. I didn't think it was going to be, let's beat you quick, you know, because I don't really care about doing that all that much. So I'll do it every once in a while, but it's not that important to me, you know? So.
And it may have been easier if there was just two people. Like I think you kind of probably need more than an hour to have a real productive discussion. I mean, because also the four of you each had very different arguments. If both sides were sort of converging on the same argument rather than having four separate openings, that may have helped too, because there was too much to choose from. No one was focusing on one of the arguments. Each person had their own sort of argument they were following, and then it ended up centering mostly just on Schuyler's.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely, that's a good point. I don't know how to avoid that because there were four really different arguments with almost entirely different, types of conversation. Schuyler's was more or less the problem of evil redux, something he talks about all the time, and his syllogism kind of naturally led to the problem of evil.
What I'd want to do, is to try to help these things is try to have a few conversations beforehand to try to get people on the same page, and or maybe have a joint opening statement between each side. So you guys have to confer beforehand to make sure you're really providing one.
Why you smoke a joint before you start? What?
No. Yeah, no, but again, I mean, I think modern day debate, I mean, it's a debate show, right? So
sometimes
my focus is a little different. Debate is fun, but it's a little different than productive discussion. I think debate is often more sort of getting messages out and entertainment rather than back and forth discourse, I think.
Right. I debates are sometimes fun. And the first debate I was in with Schuyler, he was fine. This debate, he started out just too hyper. And it was too annoying. It's just that simple. He was too hyper and it was really annoying. And eventually I was starting to get, up mad. Just relax.
Oh, yeah, you could tell you were getting mad. You were pissed. Yeah. Another question from Gavin. A question from writer John Buck through Gavin. Craig, is Mrs. Reed's undefeated record in winning arguments still intact?
Of course, 405 to 0.
That's right.
Crush.
You could either
Crush.
be happy or you can be right, right?
Exactly. Or you
Yeah.
can be both. You're happy because you crushed the opponent.
That's right. And Spartan Theology says Craig and Caleb were not really on the same page, and I agree with that. You guys had very different arguments, which made it hard to.
But that could actually work, because if we had more of a, I promise you, I'm trying to convince Caleb of this too. So you guys got to help me, because I really think Caleb and I, that could work, because we're so different. It's like Lennon and McCartney. You know, it's like.
Yeah. I think the problem is, I think you need either a longer stream or to plan a succession of streams, because an hour, which I think in modern day debate they try to do an hour and then questions, it's really hard to fit in 4 different topics in an hour, like
right.
4
I mean,
different arguments in an hour.
We could just have a like Dry Apologist and I ahead of time could have a one.
Right.
Him and I are on basically the same page with metaphorical truths in the Bible. So we could have a discussion on that where we're both on sort of the same page and just backing up each other's points with somebody who would be down with that. That would probably work.
Right.
Something like that. But yes, this was a little bit all over the place by design. four separate topics that in any single topic could have been 2 hours easily. The Trinity itself could have been 2 hours easily. The problem evil, 2 hours. So any single topic could have been really involved. Everything you guys are saying is true. I kind of fixated, even in my criticism, I fixated on Schuyler being too aggressive and the weakness of his syllogism. Those are the only things I really talked about in my criticism, my analysis of the debate.
Right. Yeah, but it's a good. Yeah, we learn, right? We learn how to, through experience. And I've never been on that channel, so I mean, so it's good that you went out and did it.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's fun. Most of the times I'm on the channel, it's been fine. That always happens a little in debates. There's always a little bit of gotcha. Nailed you to the wall. And, I was hoping to rise above it this time, in that a little bit can still be fun and productive, but, it didn't happen. So, anywho. So, shall we wrap up? Should we close up shop? Have we had a successful little conversation?
Yeah, I think it was good. How about you?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we kind of understand what we're doing going forward too. The next stream on this will be in 3 weeks, and we clear what the next step is, right?
Yeah, and I'll pick up that book, and I'll start going through the Gospels. 50 sounds like a lot, but maybe I'll come up with 50.
Well,
but
you can stop at any time and say I only got 20 for this time.
Yeah.
50 total, and however many you get to between now and the next 3 weeks, fine with me. Except not 3.
I'll also be probably noting some of the things. Maybe not for our next discussion, but I'll be in my own notes probably noting, because when I go through this, I want to note the pros and the cons.
Of course. You'll be saying that he forced an abortion here. This is where God forced an abortion, and this is where what?
Like I do see, my current view of the Bible is that it's written by men, and I understand it as stories written for that time. So I'm not quite as I'm a little more understanding of that. I mean, I think what I say is, in a way, that I understand this. This seems much more justifiable written by men than written by a deity. Is
right, but that's not our. That's nothing to do with what we're. I'm not trying to prove to you that the Bible is inerrant. So that's neither here nor there for our project. That's the point.
Yeah.
So
I'll try to focus on the parts that I agree with or think are at least are positive. And,
right. That's what's relevant to our project.
Sure.
Not your objections. You can note them if you want to, but that's not the point of what you and I are doing together. I'm not trying to prove to you that that you need to see the Bible as inerrant. Promise.
Right.
That's not the point. So
yeah, so that's good. So yeah, no, this was a good stream, and I think and I'm hoping to figure out a way that we can multi-stream to both our channels for these without
ask
having to pay
John.
for it.
John's a computer expert. John will figure it out.
Yeah, that bastard. He's good for something.
Yes. Amen.
We love you, John. And yeah, that's great. So I think we're good. So thank you everybody for watching. It was nice to have an active chat, and I'm getting better, I think, at keeping an eye on chatting. It's a skill to develop, to keep an eye on chat while having a conversation, paying attention to both. So I think I'm totally getting better at it. And we'll sign off and say thanks everyone, and thanks Craig for this. This was great.
Yeah, this was cool. Good night, guys. And are they gone?